Hey friends, I'm Otis Gibbs, and this is Chris Swope. He's going to talk about the time that he spent working at a legendary guitar shop in New York City.
1995 to 2002, I worked at Sadowsky Guitars in Manhattan. So it was Times Square, 1600 Broadway, right around the corner from 48th Street. Building, repairing, all the best stuff. You know, this was a shop in Times Square in a building that no longer is there. You know, 10-story building doesn't belong in Times Square anymore, apparently. And it was sort of like a little, you know, room here, room there, hallway there. That was all very tight. Come around the corner, and there's Lou Reed, right? And Lou Reed. And I just look at him and I go, you know, and he looks at me, you know, and I walking right at him, and here's my room 2 feet in front of him, and I just turn, and I just go into it. That was it, you know. I remember one time Lou called, and I picked up the phone. I was never up front, but I picked up the phone, and Lou has that voice, you know. He's like, "Is Roger there?" And I'm like, "I know it's Lou." I'm like, "Yeah, can I tell him who's calling?" He's like, "It's Lou." And I'm thinking, that's cool. And then I'm like, "Lou." It's like, Lou Reed. Yeah. Like, okay, yeah. We saw him at the Beacon once, and we got comps. Roger got comps everywhere for us, which was super cool of him. But this one, Lou got us really good seats, you know, maybe third, fourth row back. I was there. I know Roger was there. I know his wife was there, maybe a couple of guys from the shop. But we all kind of filed in, and I'm closest to the aisle, but there's still 2 seats here, and they're empty. And the end of, you know, encore or whatever, everybody stands up, and suddenly these 2 people stand next to me. It's a man and a woman. The woman's right next to me, and she's like, you know, jewelry, white dress. I'm just seeing this from the peripheral vision, right? And, you know, we're standing, and she's like starting to like invade my space a little bit, you know, encroach upon I'm in here for an hour and a half, and here she comes, you know, and I'm like kind of like elbowing her back, you know. It's like, I'm not giving an inch. And song, you know, last song, maybe they did a couple of encores, they're gone. And then I don't remember, I think it was that night, Roger was like, "Did you see who you were next to?" Like, there at the end? I'm like, "No." It was Bianca Jagger. And that was the cool stuff about New York, too. It's just you saw people all the time. But, I mean, that shop was a lot of heavy cats, you know, like opening the door, working a Saturday, somebody knocks, it's John Schofield. You know, meeting Marcus Miller and Nathan East and, you know, these heavy session guys. And I remember seeing Patti Smith there. You know, I remember walking in one day, there's Joan Jett. It was just fantastic. It was really cool. The very first thing I built on my own there got hung on the wall as a demo, and Paul Simon bought it for Edie Brickell as a gift. You know, and it's like, that was just the world there. Everybody cool either bought stuff there or took their guitars to be repaired there. And I mean, the education I got on vintage gear was just unbelievable. I had a title in lieu of pay. I was the production manager. But there were, you know, at times there were 5 of us, including Roger. Sometimes we might have 7 or 8 people, but I don't think the shop ever got any bigger than that. So I was the primary bass builder. Norio Imai was the primary electric guitar builder. And then we were back in our own world. There were a couple of other folks who would do wiring and, you know, sanding and stuff like that. And then there was the showroom, and Roger and Ken would both do repairs, deal with customers. Frank would do repairs. And then each of those guys would occasionally build. But my bread and butter daily gig was building basses. I built probably 85% of the basses that came out of there in those 7 years. I did some repair. I built some guitars. But I mean, that was really what my gig was just, schedule them. And, we all sanded, we all sprayed lacquer out the window in Times Square, and threaded necks. We all kind of did that. And so I would make the schedule every month. But yeah, it was great. We built several for Tom Hamilton from Aerosmith. I got to meet him a couple of times. Built several for Jason Newsted from Metallica. Got to meet him. Got to go to Lollapalooza when they headlined Lollapalooza. Got to be backstage, standing next to John McEnroe by the Metallica trailer. Naturally, that was cool. Yeah, but those types of folks, of course, Will and Marcus Miller and those types. I met Ron Carter there, of all people. Sure. I met Jim Hall there. Some just heavy guys. Hiram Bullock, I wish I would have talked to. Hiram Bullock, I don't know if you remember Hiram. He was the original guitar player in the World's Most Dangerous Band with Paul Schaefer. And he had a record out in the late 80s, early 90s that just lit me. He played with Dave Sanborn. And fantastic player, had this cool Strat that had just been like no finish left, humbuckered, but vintage Strat. And I got my hands on that Strat, but he didn't own it anymore. He was in the shop. He was an addict, and he was in bad shape. And I wish I would have inserted myself. I just never did. There's an acceptable time, but most of the time somebody comes in on business. They don't want some fanboy. The only time I ever inserted myself was when Freddie Johnston was in the shop, because Freddie had been in Lawrence, Kansas, and I lived in Lawrence, Kansas for 10 years. And I had seen Freddie right before he left town playing a band with this local guy who's fantastic, Todd Kitchen. And the name of their band, I think it was a 1-gig band, was, I think, Los Guys. And all I remember is this guy, and it was Freddie, doing kung fu fighting or whatever. But that record, This Perfect World, my wife had moved back. She's from New York. She'd moved back, and I had stayed in Lawrence. I was trying to decide if I was going to move up. And one of the many things that because I never thought I wanted to live in New York, that record, This Perfect World, all these songs about New York, and somehow it romanticized the whole thing for me and helped me yeah, man, I want to go there and write songs like Freddie or whatever. So when I saw him, I walked in, I'm like, hey, weren't you in Los Guys? And he was like, yeah, man. And, and then I spilled my guts. I'm like, man, your record helped me decide to move to New York. I told him the story or whatever. I listened to that record a lot. And he was I was visibly making him uncomfortable. And he was like, oh man, those songs are so sad. Why would you say that? It's like, that record is so depressing. I'm like, well, dude, you made it. 2000, I was still there, that building on 9/11, that was still a thing. But sometime over the next year, I stayed one more year. The landlords were kicking everyone out, allegedly, to remodel everything. And then they were going to let them back in 2 years at 2 or 3 times the price. That was the pitch they were given. Where are you going to go for 2 or 3 years? And so Roger moved to Dumbo, down under Brooklyn, down under Manhattan Bridge overpass. So first stop in Brooklyn. And I went with him for the move, but I had already, I didn't want to do that. I'd been there 7 years. My wife had gone to graduate school in Buffalo. My dad was sick, and somehow Nashville seemed like I could get in a car and drive to Kansas City, which I could, and I did. Long drive. But I went with him to Dumbo. But yeah, that was the Studebaker building. It was also the National Screen Archive later on. But originally it was built as like a Studebaker showroom type of thing, 10 stories high. And then they housed films in there forever. And so like where we would put the guitars was a safe that was fireproof because it used to store acetate. But when I went back, I don't know, before my kids were born, I don't remember how many years, it was gone. They found a loophole. They thought it was going to have to stay there because it was on a historic charter or whatever, but it's New York. You know, they're always moving up. Way too much airspace above that. So now it's like, I don't know what. Can't look that high.